Hi, welcome back to a slightly different looking workshop for episode 6 of the Telecaster refurbishment project. And in this episode we're going to be doing some finishing off work on the neck, principally getting the headstock decal done. Okay, so it's time to get this neck sorted out. There's three main jobs that I want to do at this stage. I need to put the decal on the headstock, and I want to start work on the nut, so I want to get that so I've at least got a nut blank that fits in there and is approximately the right size and radius. But first of all, I want to get all of this lacquer off these frets, because this has been on a few days now and it's starting to harden up, and the harder the lacquer is, the more difficult it is to get off. So I'm going to tackle that job first, and then we can do the other two bits. And to get the lacquer off these frets, first of all, I'm just going to cut with a scalpel where the fret meets the fretboard. Very gently. And then I'm just going to take one of these metal fretboard protectors, put that over the fret, and then I've got, all this is a bit of brass bar. I'm using brass because it's softer than the fret material, so it won't mar it, but it is harder than the lacquer. And just run that over it a few times. And it will just chip all of that lacquer off. Like that. So I'm just going to work my way up the fretboard. This is a very long and boring job. So I'll join you back when it's done. Now, all the work I've been doing reconfiguring the workshop kind of kept me away from getting the lacquer off these frets for about 3 or 4 days, and I think in the end that was probably a little bit too long. The lacquer had got really hard and was kind of quite well stuck to the fret, so that made it more difficult than it needed to be. And I also picked up what seems like a really good tip off one of my regular viewers, Mick Carr, who suggested that I use some paste wax on the frets before I lacquer, and apparently the lacquer will just peel off really easily then. And I think as long as you don't get any onto the actual fretboard before you put the lacquer on, that seems like a really useful hint. So thanks a lot for that, Mick. And that's probably one of my favourite parts of YouTube, when people kind of offer you advice and hints and tips in the comment section. I'm a long way from knowing everything about this game, and it really does help me, and by extension everybody who watches this channel, when I get new information like that. So if you have got any hints or tips that you'd like to share with me or the kind of wider community, why not drop them down in the comment? We can have a chat about them. Or why not just comment and say hi anyway? It's always nice to hear from new people, and I do always make an effort to answer all of the comments that I can. So with the frets cleaned up, the next job I want to approach is to get the headstock decal on. And to do that, I'm just going to use some water slide decal paper, and I've already printed those out a couple of days ago. So there's a whole bunch of my logos on there, ready to be used. And you might immediately spot there's an issue there, and they're actually printed backwards. And the reason I've done that is that the logo that was on here initially had a black outline with gold infill. So I'm going to redo that, and to do that successfully you need to print them out backwards. So you're infilling the gold with one of these kind of metallic liquid ink pens on the back of the decal. You need to leave it to dry, spray it with some clear acrylic lacquer just to seal it all in, and then you can cut it out, apply it to the headstock, and then over lacquer it with the nitro. So I'm going to bring you in closer, and then we'll have a look and see if we can get a couple of these filled in nicely without going over the lines. I was never that great at colouring in as a kid. Just have to see if my hands got any steadier with age. This isn't actually as hard as you might think it is. These liquid ink pens really do work quite nicely for this kind of stuff. I think it also helps that the black lines are quite thick, so even if you go over a little bit, it's covered by the black. I think it also really helps that the whole time I was doing this I had my tongue stuck out the corner of my mouth, because that obviously makes your colouring in better. I probably left this ink to dry for about a good 2 hours after I'd done it, just to make sure that it wasn't going to bleed when we put the acrylic lacquer onto it. Once it's all nice and dry, I cut it out kind of very roughly. And then I'm just going to attach it to some masking paper with some tape, just to stop it blowing away. And I'll give it a quick couple of coats with the acrylic lacquer. I'm not sure if it would work using nitro lacquer to seal these. I might have to give that a try one time, but it says use acrylic in the instructions, so that's what I did. The water slide paper is very easy to get hold of. I just get it off Amazon. It's relatively cheap. And having left the lacquer to dry for a good hour or so, I then just cut the decal a little bit closer, so there isn't a huge amount to over lacquer. I do, however, like to leave a little bit of a margin around the edge of the printing. And all I've got here is a little bowl of warm water. I'm just spreading a little bit on the headstock just to allow the decal to slide easily. And if I can manage to pick it up, just stick it in the water, make sure it all goes underneath. And you need to leave that to soak for about 30 seconds. Now you have to be very, very careful with these. They are quite delicate, and if you get them folded over, it can be a bit of a nightmare. And I've just got the last little bit folded on itself. And then just position it where you want it. Now I'm setting this back a little bit from where the decal would traditionally be placed on a Telecaster, and that's strategic positioning to cover up that little hole that I filled in. But I think that looks okay. And then I just mop up as much of the excess moisture as I can. Bit of final positioning, and we're good to go. And I'm going to leave that to dry for a good 2 or 3 hours, just so all the moisture's gone out of it. and then just very quickly mask it up. Now the initial few coats are quite thick. I've hardly thinned this lacquer down at all, just to get some volume of lacquer over the top of this. Okay, so this has had probably 5 or 6 coats of lacquer now, and this is getting buried quite well, but you can probably see there in the reflection that there is still an edge around the decal. Get in the light. So yeah, most of this area seems to be covered quite well, but there is an edge around here, and you can feel that it is proud. So to cure that, what I'm going to do, I've got a little bit of 400 wet and dry paper, and I'm just going to very gently work some of the lacquer off the top of the decal. Now I'm not trying to get that flat at the moment. What I'm doing is just removing a bit of that hump, so when I put the next couple of coats on, that'll be less pronounced. I can sand back and then just repeat until I get somewhere near where I need it to be. Eventually I'll have enough on there that I can flat the whole thing, and this will be buried. Okay, so I know I said at the beginning I was going to tackle 3 jobs in this episode. Truth be told, I've run out of time a little bit. The jobs that I have done have taken a bit longer than I thought they were going to do. And as a result of that, the lacquer on the headstock is still wet. So I don't want to be messing around trying to fit a nut into that, because it's just going to make a mess of that soft lacquer. Now I mentioned earlier that I've been doing quite a lot of work in the shed recently. And if you want to see how I'm getting on with that, you can always watch this video here while I get on with making the next episode for this series, which will be out in a couple of days' time. So until then, as always, like if you've liked, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.